Call the meeting to order, please. This is the Village Riverside Board of Trustees regular meeting for Thursday, March 15th, 2018. The time is 7 p.m. Please call the roll.
President Sells.
Here.
Trustee Pollack.
Here.
Trustee Giza.
All right, here.
Trustee Lumsden.
Here.
Trustee Valerie.
Here.
Trustee Sedevich.
Here.
Trustee Peters. Here. Village Manager Francis. Here. Village Attorney Marves.
Here.
Also present Village Clerk Haley.
Thank you very much. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Welcome to everyone who's here with us tonight, and those of you watching at home. If you are here and you would like to make a comment at any time, I ask that you be recognized by the President and that you make your comment from the podium so that the folks at home can hear and see what you have to say. First up this evening are presentations and public comment. In the wake of some of the sad national events that we've had in the past months, I have asked our two chiefs to please advise the Village of Riverside on our emergency preparedness procedures. So we have with us Chief Buckley and Chief Weitzel. Gentlemen.
Good evening, President Sells, members of the board, Village Manager Francis. Appreciate you giving us the opportunity to come here this evening and speak with you regarding what some call disaster preparedness. I call it emergency preparedness because a disaster, as defined in the dictionary, is a sudden event bringing great damage, loss, or destruction. Well, we go beyond that also. We look at emergency preparedness and what we consider or call all hazards emergencies. So they start with both police and fire, public works, and when we have incidents like this, we bring in everybody, all village staff, we all work together. I did a little PowerPoint to go over some of the things that we were going to discuss this evening. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to show a couple things that we now have on our website here in the village, as also the IEMA website with the state. So some of the natural occurring emergencies that we encounter are floods, earthquakes, tornadoes, wildfires, blizzards, and other geological processes. I threw wildfires in there. Recently there was a town close by to us that had 80 acres that burnt just the other day. So they are close by us. Not that we necessarily have to deal with some of the things that like California has, but there is potential. We have a lot of wooded areas around us. Man-made disasters or emergencies that we deal with: power outages, hazardous material spills, explosions, chemical or biological attacks, as well as nuclear blasts and radiological emergencies. Some of these emergencies can cause loss of life, property, as well as an economic impact to the entire community. The severity of a disaster or an emergency or an all hazards emergency depends on the ability to recover along with the affected population's resilience. Planning for disasters is vital to the successful outcome of an incident and the ability of a community to recover appropriately. Some of our preparation starts long before an incident may occur. We look at our building codes constantly to make sure that our buildings are being built strong enough to withstand high winds or potential flooding. We look at good infrastructure, our water mains, our sewers, that they're able to handle runoff and different issues which might work with flooding, as well as our roads and bridges to make sure that they can withstand road traffic if there were an emergency that occurred. Flood mitigation. Years ago, we put up a levee on Groveland Avenue to help mitigate some flooding over there. We're still working on that project because there's more work that needs to be done in that area to hopefully alleviate more flooding. So we're always looking at ways in which we can reduce it in our area. Unfortunately, we live along a river, which it's inherent that we may sustain some flooding if there is heavy rainfall or a lot of snow melt at the same time. And we address any known or unknown weaknesses or vulnerabilities. We constantly work with our counterparts to look at different things and make sure that if there is something we see or something or potential for something that could occur, we try to plan for it and prepare for it before it happens. Some of the other types of all hazards emergencies include extreme heat or cold emergencies, larger extended power outages. We work very closely with ComEd when we do have those. Water main breaks, we work closely with Public Works to make sure if there's anything else they need during that time that they can accommodate, and we can accommodate whatever they need. Snow and ice conditions, which hopefully we're done with for the year. Gas main leaks. A couple years ago, Nicor changed our entire gas system from a low pressure system to a high pressure system. So now when we do get gas leaks, they're high pressure. A lot of gas is coming out, so there are times we might have to evacuate areas of town depending on the wind direction and things like that. Tornadoes and high wind. Seems like every year, I just read a study that Illinois is the number 5 state in the United States for tornadoes. We get a lot of them. Most of them, luckily, are south of us, but there have been some that have gotten pretty close to our border. We do get a lot of high winds, though, during the months of, especially during the month of April and May. Excessive rainfall and flooding. We've all experienced that here in Riverside. Once again, I hope we don't have to again, but being along the river, there is always that possibility. Incidents on our waterway and our river. Not too long ago, we were notified by an engineer on the Burlington Northern as they were going over the trestle, they saw a sheen on top of the river. Turned out that we worked with Water Reclamation District, and we tracked it all the way up to past Franklin Park, and somebody was illegally dumping stuff into the Salt Creek, which then runs into the Des Plaines River just north of 31st Street. It goes under the zoo parking lot, actually. There's a tunnel there, which they didn't realize was flowing into the river at that time, and we traced it all the way back up there. It took a while to do so, but we look for things like that. And then transportation incidents involving vehicles, trucks, trains, and planes. We have First Avenue, Ogden, Harlem Avenue, which are pretty heavily traveled for vehicle and truck traffic. We have our Burlington Northern train that runs through the center of town, and we're in the flight path for Midway Airport. So hopefully we don't have to experience anything else with those either. Partnerships. I figured everybody would like that picture. How do we as a village prepare for these types of incidents? And that's us working together. Partnerships with organizations, this provides for resources on a local, county, state, and federal level. Networking and developing relationships with individuals across various organizations. Village staff frequently participates in meetings, trainings, wherein other resources and allocations are available, especially to do planning and training scenarios for us. Those are vital to what we do. So on a local level, when we have a fire incident or hazardous materials incident, we'll call in our neighbors. We'll bring our neighbors in to assist us if need be. And then after we use up all those resources or we need additional resources, we reach out to MABUS, which is the Mutual Aid Box Alarm System. That's a one-call shop. We call up to our dispatch center through MABUS, tell them what we need, what we're requesting. They already have pre-planned response cards as to who they're going to call to respond to assist us. They don't always call your neighbors right next door. They'll leapfrog. So that way they're not bringing everybody from one area into one scene. They bring them in from further out, so that way they can still have responses in those other areas that are close by. MABUS is a statewide organization. There are currently 65 divisions throughout the state of Illinois. Riverside is a part of Division 10. Which covers the I-55 corridor all the way from the west side of Chicago out to Romeoville, Lamont, Bolingbrook area. MABUS has a lot of resources. Some of the photos that you can see on there with some of the resources on the top corner is their fan truck. That's stored at Lyons for Division 10. Each division has their own resources when it comes to these. So our fan truck is actually based over at the Lyons Fire Department. On the bottom corner, we have our dive rescue. Currently, that's based out of Oak Brook Fire Department. And on the bottom right-hand corner is our decon truck for decontamination from hazardous materials, and that's based at Argonne National Lab. They're part of our division also. Chief Weitzel is going to talk real quick about some of the law enforcement capabilities.
Yes, Steve, so in this overall program, we're really support. So the police department, in most of these disasters or emergencies, if there's not a criminal element to it, our job is to support the fire operations or the emergency management operations. Unless we would have looting, it would become a police issue, or traffic issues, or helping evacuations. But we couldn't do it there's no possible way with a force our size, so we would rely on ILEAS, which is it's similar to the MAVIS that Chief Buckley talked about, but it's the police version. But what you get with ILEAS is squad cars. You get personnel, and they have 5 levels, 5 cars per level, and it goes out. So our first level would be our neighboring towns, and then it goes out in a pattern, and it goes out into DuPage County and farther. If we needed, say we needed 30 police cars, we would have to do a car plan of at least probably a 10 call out would bring us in more personnel. And it would bring us in supervisors too, so because you need to be able to manage the officers with other supervisors. But I really want to stress that our job, even here, even when we've had the floods and the tornadoes, is to let the fire operations and the emergency management people run the operation unless there is a criminal element, and we're there to support. So in this case, we're taking direction. In this case, we'd be taking direction from Chief Buckley on what's needed. If there's not do they need us to block traffic? Do they need us to search homes for people that may be evacuated? Do they need us to check for looters, secure areas? Maybe even remove cars that are parked in the area that they need to operate in, to get tow trucks in there to move them on. So we would not, the police in most cases would not be the lead agency in these. We would be the support agencies, but these are the mutual aid groups that we would rely on. Some of them are criminal we would not use in this type of situation, but we would definitely use ILEAS, because that is all about manpower and all about squad cars to be able to block roadways and pathways. So the one main thing that would happen if the chief or the fire chief or they declared that we had to go into emergency operations, we have a written plan, written documents. And the first thing we do as an agency is our officers go to 12-hour shifts. And we've done that before. So if we have a flood, they immediately go. Everybody works, including the civilians, the administrative. Everybody goes to 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then we can just rotate the people and get the most officers on the street as we can without having the 8-hour shift. So that would be like the very first thing we would do. We would just switch to 12-hour shifts. And then we would just support the emergency operations.
The next capability that we utilize, Ed Bailey is going to discuss a little bit, but it's called IPWAM. It's the Illinois Public Works Mutual Aid Network.
Public Works also support for any emergency operation. We would operate in support of the fire department, but Riverside's a member of the Illinois Public Works Mutual Aid Network, and it's modeled on some of these other law enforcement organizations that were mentioned, like ILEAS and MABIS, where communities pool their resources so that if there is some sort of emergency, a lot of those that Chief Buckley mentioned were kind of natural disasters, tornadoes and that kind of thing, we can call in public works type resources from other communities to help us recover and respond. Most of the call-outs, I guess you could say, for the Public Works Network have been for high winds or due to high winds or tornadoes. And you know, we wouldn't respond to Carbondale, but we have responded to, I think it was tornado or certainly high winds in Palatine a few years ago, where we contributed a chipper and a couple employees and a truck, and they drew that type of resources from all over and were able to more quickly respond to their really a lot of tree damage. We could do the same. We could call on other communities. There's 300 member communities in the state of Illinois. So there's significant resources from a public works standpoint available in an emergency. just like I say, these other police networks that could call in their resources.
So now that we talked about what we do here at a local level, when things do get beyond what we can handle on a local level, we start going to the county. Cook County now has a department called Department of Homeland Security. They're based out of Oak Forest, Illinois, at the old Oak Forest Hospital. They took over a large part of the hospital on the east end there. Currently, they have, it's a pretty large facility that they utilize, and they have a lot of resources down there. Recently, myself and other members of the staff, village staff, actually took a tour of the facility. I've been down there a few times, but it was a real eye-opener for the other members of the staff that went down there to actually see what they do, how they do it, and what they're capable of providing to Riverside. Riverside has actually seen some of their resources here on the 4th of July for the concerts. We've used their light towers, which are in the center top photo. Riverside hasn't used it, but it's been in our neighboring communities, the command post, which is on the left-hand side. A couple of other communities have used some of their large diameter pumps for helping with flood mitigation. And then one of the biggest things that they offer is power. If we do get a large-scale power outage, they do have power generator units that are built onto trucks, and they're able to get them here and help ComEd get our power back up and actually supplement with that. They've provided power to Hines Hospital on numerous occasions when they had large power outages over there, and air conditioning and things like that. They have so many resources that they tell us, you know, if there's something that you guys find that you may need to serve your town, somebody else probably needs it also, let us know. We'll look at acquiring it for the, you know, so that other people can use it, not just Riverside. For us to purchase a lot of this equipment, our budget wouldn't be able to sustain it. They get money from different resources, federal dollars, where they're able to purchase this equipment and then basically loan it out to all the communities that request it. Cook County Homeland Security has been an excellent partner with us. When we do have flooding incidents that occur here, we're on the phone prior to that with them, sometimes by the hour, checking in with them, seeing what the weather is going to do. They have a lot of very good capabilities to determine with the National Weather Service what's going to occur. They do modeling and all sorts of other things and sciences to find out how bad it's really going to get. So we utilize them a lot for that. It's been a very good partnership, and they're always willing to work with us and help us. Give me 1 second, hopefully. Riverside TV. These alerts are all there. Yeah.
Director Bailey, could you turn that thermostat up? I feel like we're storing meat in here.
You need a coat? I got an extra. I know better. I would.
Thank you.
Can you get my screen back up? Yeah. So this next part that I'm going to show you is the IEMA. So once we go through all our resources, we go through the county, and we need to expand beyond that. We then call them the Illinois Emergency Management Agency. Once we get to that level, that's when they start looking at federal dollars. They then go through some of the recovery processes and help people get back on their feet after something occurs. But one of the things I want to go through on here is looking at it prior to something occurring. The IEMA website, which we now have attached to our Riverside Ready website, which I'll show next, you can go to the site and it talks to you and tells you how to prepare what, like a go bag, something for you to look at. It talks about what kind of, if you take medication, have some packed in a bag, have phone numbers for your doctors, things like that, where you can grab it quickly and go should you need to be evacuated or something else. They've got some good family plans on there, how to plan if somebody's out of town and something should occur. So it really talks you through and gives you great insight as to what you can do to prepare yourself and your family. We'll go to the next one. So the question is Riverside truly prepared to handle what we call an all hazards emergency or a disaster in town? And the answer is yes. We partner with all of our resources around us. The entire village works together, whether it be police, fire, public works, administrative staff. Everybody works together to accomplish what needs to be done. So on our Riverside preparedness, emergency preparedness, on the village website, on the very bottom, there's an area called helpful resources. So we've got Ready Illinois on the top, and right below it, we put, so you can access the Cook County Homeland Security website also. So these are both very good resources in order for you to plan ahead of time should an incident occur here in Riverside. One of the biggest things that Cook County Homeland Security says, if you see something, say something. And we agree with that. If you see something happening, don't think that we as public safety already know about it. Please call 911 and let us know. Anytime that you feel that something needs to be reported, you may be the 5th person that called to report it, but we'd rather have 5 people call than have nobody call. So definitely if you see something, say something, give us a call, call 911. Are there any questions?
So I can attest, I went along on that, the visit to Homeland Security. It's an extraordinary facility. I think one of the things that impressed us most, they actually have a capability of us moving our entire village government and staff to their location with communications set up so that if for some reason this building or the police station or whatever was not capable of being used because of some kind of disaster, we could relocate there and continue to run municipal services from there. So it's an extraordinary opportunity. I just really wanted to do this tonight because I think you've all seen that although we're a small town, we are kind of a hub of a large support group, and our staff, both our police, fire, and public works, do such an amazing job of making sure that they are ready before something happens. And I hope that everyone who saw this evening will take Chief Buckley's advice. Make sure that you are too. Take the time to prepare yourselves and your family for an emergency now, when you have time to think about it and can talk about it as a family before something happens and you're under the stress of that kind of event. So gentlemen, thank you very much. Any other questions from the audience or from trustees?
And the emergency preparedness portion of our website, the village's website, we are working on that still. We will be adding more items to it. So if there are any questions regarding, you can all look on there. I'm always available. Chief Weitzel's always available. Ed Bailey's always available. So please reach out to us if there are any questions or concerns, and we will definitely address them and make sure that they're handled appropriately.
I guess the only question I would have, and this is probably an obvious one given recent events, is could either or both of you say something about our school situation and the kind of procedures we have in place to protect our schools?
This is a two-part thing, so I'll let Chief Weitzel start, and then there are things that we are working on the EMS side and fire side of that also with them directly.
So I want to be careful about what I say about the schools, but I mean, what's known publicly is by law we have to drill with them every year. That's a state statute, and we do. And the police department has to sign off on the document, and then the school's got to turn that into the Illinois Department of Education, I believe. And we just completed District 96 in February. We're still working with 208, but we've done 208 every year for intruder drills, even just disturbance drills. And now we've started to work, we've worked with St. Mary's, and we just started to work with the school here on Woodside, across from Hauser Central.
Tallgrass.
Yeah, Tallgrass. So we just started to work with them last week. And that's all on intruder drills and hardening. Simple stuff such as their procedures for locking their doors. Do they have one entrance where they can buzz somebody in and out? Do they have a camera system? If they do, does people know how to use it? Because typically when something happens and the police go try to get the cameras, nobody can seem to know how to work the system. So they have to call the manufacturer. And we practice or drill with our neighbors, or in some cases NIPUS, which is our version of SWAT. It's really an emergency response team. And school staff is involved. Soft lockdowns. As you know, District 208 now has a security officer, the retired chief from North Riverside. That's already paid dividends, in my opinion, in 2 instances. While those weren't violent instances, they were situations that he handled immediately and then was able to turn over to us. So our response time was like nothing because he already had the situation in hand, and then all we needed to do is come there and handle it legally. So, but they've been very accommodating, and I mean the superintendents at the schools and the districts. You know, then that's not the way it always was. So maybe that's a result of the state law that was only passed a couple years ago. But they have let us in. We come in, we do the testing. My 2 officers that run those tests are John Cairo and Leo Coder. I would venture to say that Sergeant Coder he's really a subject expert. There's no question. His expertise in that area is sought by other agencies. So they've developed those plans, and so we do have plans for a response, but I can assure the board that if there was really a violent situation in one of our schools, there wouldn't be a single resident in Riverside that wouldn't know that, because the police response would be massive. And maybe it's overkill. So, you know, if you saw what went on yesterday at Northwestern University with all the police that were there, and that was a hoax, but they didn't know it was a hoax. They had about the whole North Shore police. I think every police department in the North Shore was at the Northwestern, at the Evanston campus, because they had a report of an active shooter in a dorm. So they have to prepare. And I do believe that you're going to see maybe some change happening within law enforcement because of the Parkland, Florida shootings. And I'm not talking about gun control. That's not the issue I'm talking about. I'm talking about how the police respond, what the police responsibility is, what type of officers we're assigning to the school. And the training that goes into those officers needs to be mandated and needs to be universal throughout the United States. That's not currently the case. So I think that you will see that happen, and that will be a good thing. But we do train, and as I learned when we did our last training, so you know, even the other day we did the canine searches at the high school. The kids, the minute the dogs came, they were texting their parents. I think the parents knew before. I mean, I don't think we were in the door at the high school that the kids weren't texting on their phones into their parents that, you know, the police are in the school with the dogs. So, you know, communication happens very, very quickly. So it's foolish to think that like the school wanted to shut down their servers, for example, right? So that kids couldn't send out. Well, that's foolish. You know, the community. It's going to happen instantaneously. It's going to go like that. There's really no fooling anybody or any sneaking around. So. That just shows you we need to be prepared, and we need to work in reality. And just the canine search the other day, we had 8 municipalities, and the Cook County Sheriff's Police assist us with 10 dogs. and we were in and out of the school in 35 minutes. So there was no contact between students and canines. And I should remind maybe the board knows this, but once in a while I get these nasty emails from people that don't think we should be doing that. But that's the school initiative. The school approaches us, asks us if we have the capability to provide, in this case, the canine search, right? And will we run it? It's not we're not going to the school in that case. It's their building, their operations. They want to do it. And in this case, we had a firearms dog there from the Brookfield Zoo. But we're happy to assist them. But I want people to know that that's the school's building, right? And they're asking us to assist them. So we're more than happy to do that. But I had one email sent to me that said that I was a stormtrooper. Well, I'm not a stormtrooper. I'm responding to what the superintendent and his staff thought would be a good idea for safety at the school. So I just wanted to maybe get that out while I was here.
Chief, just before you hand the baton there, since we're talking about 208 in the building, can you give us an update on where we are with trying to obtain the repeaters for the communication system within the building?
Yes, I was notified that they have had their grant meeting for their awards, but the awards have not been made public yet. So there is less money available this time at this grant period, so less agencies will be receiving money, but I know that I've done everything humanly possible. They probably hate me down there so much from calling them, and our elected officials here have sent letters in support. We've reached out to our state representatives, our county representatives, and I personally think that after what happened in Parkland, Florida, this grant should go right to the top.
I agree.
I mean, it's all about communications and safety in a school building. But I was notified that they did set up the committee. They have had the meeting. They have not made the awards yet. So I would imagine that we might have our answer within the next 2 weeks, maybe, or 3 weeks, if we were successful.
Thank you for all your work on that. Chief Buckley.
And just talking a little more about how our response is to the school. If there is a response to the school with the police department, we embed ourselves as the fire and EMS in with the police, not in their initial response, but in their follow-up groups. Hopefully we don't have to offer aid, but if need be, our medics are trained up to that level, and we're doing more training with the police starting very shortly here to make sure that if there is aid that is needed, that it's there quickly and provided very quickly by our medics.
Anything else? Thank you, gentlemen, very much, and thank you for everything that you do to keep us safe. And I'm glad Mr. Bailey's here. I think sometimes that component of the preparedness and response is missed, so we appreciate what you do. Thank you. So next up, we're going to call Chief Weitzel back up to the podium. He's going to review the 2017 wedge year-end report. Chief
Thank you.
Weitzel.
I'll make this very brief. I forgot to say that the photo Chief Buckley put up there of me and him was never supposed to be made public. I don't know why you put that there.
It looks photoshopped to me.
So I want to just go over the wedge report because we're going to make it public. We've already distributed it to some of our local media. The chiefs all have it. They can put it on their websites. We have a little bit less activity in 2017 than 2016, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is manpower. So many of the agencies that are in the wedge unit had to reassign some of their detectives and TAC officers back to street patrol until they got back to strength because of retirements. So there wasn't a lot of days, as many days we worked this year, or 17 or 16. Remember, it's a part-time investigative tool. We try to do 4 to 6 days a month. Sometimes there's more activity between like May and maybe the end of September because of the warm weather. Some of our bigger towns were severely impacted by manpower issues. An example of that was Oak Park. Oak Park had some severe manpower issues where they had to basically put their entire tactical unit back in uniform. That has since been rectified where they've hired and they've put officers back in. So I only highlighted the major arrests. And we took a turn a couple years ago by trying to only go after these criminals that affect all of our agencies. Because I can assure you that people denoted in this report, most of these guys, they had no idea whether they were arrested in Riverside or North Riverside or River Forest. Boundaries mean nothing to them, okay? They literally don't know where they are sometimes when they're arrested, but they're committing crimes in all of our communities. They're affecting all of us. So if we made an arrest, it probably helped every community, not just the community you're targeting. There are 2 individuals in here that were our operations. The one was the aggravated stalking was a person that came over to Riverside Brookfield High School parking lot and tried to assault a teacher, which of course was his ex-wife. And then he fled, and we made an arrest on him in Countryside with the wedge unit. So it affects our community too. We've actually used them. These are major arrests. We concentrate on the larger cases that affect more regional. And then this year, I'm going to be stepping down as the wedge chairperson. So I've been doing that since Bill Kushner from Berwyn, who started this. Bill Kushner was the chief in Berwyn for many years. He is now the chief of police in Des Plaines. He started the program when he came from Chicago PD. I took over when he left Berwyn to go to Des Plaines. And I've done it long enough, so we are going to have an election at the end of March. I'm going to step down, and it's time. It's good to have change. So we're going to have a new chief that's going to step in and take over. We'll probably make that announcement in early April, who the new chairperson is. So when I made the announcement that I was stepping down as chairperson, my son called me 10 minutes later and said, "Are you retiring?" So I said, "No, I'm not retired. I don't know how these rumors start." But I've done it for 6 years, so it's time for some fresh perspectives. There's several new chiefs in the western suburbs that have been promoted, and it's time to give them an opportunity to lead the organization. So I think that's a good thing. So I will take any questions if you have it. If not, we'll post that on our website.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. We're going to set a mandatory retirement age for you at like 85.
You're talking to my wife.
So next up is public comment. Is anyone here that would like to address the board? Moving on, we'll go to the reports of village officers. First up is spy report. I have a couple things. One, I'm very sad to report that Juanita Ray passed away yesterday, the wife of Richard Ray, one of our longest serving commissioners in our town. And Juanita was, she was a woman of great grace and humility. She did not like the spotlight. I was talking to Charlie Pipel, who's the chair of the Preservation Commission today, and he told me a story that when they first started landmarking the homes here in Riverside, Juanita spent a lot of time and energy creating these beautiful certificates that could be given to the people whose homes were being landmarked. And she was adamant that she didn't want anybody to know that she had been responsible for it, or that she had done all that work. So that was really the kind of woman that she was. So our hearts go out to Richard and his family, and Juanita Ray, rest in peace. The next thing is, I just want to remind everyone that next Tuesday is voting day. There are 2 referenda on the ballot for Riverside that you need to pay attention to. And I've asked, we do have there are two changes in polling locations, and I've asked our village clerk to please explain that to everybody watching.
So throughout Cook County, there were, I believe, 50 polling locations that were changed. In the village of Riverside, the 2 precincts that previously voted at Ames School have now been relocated. Ames is under construction, so there is no polling at Ames. Precinct 10 is now, will be voting at the Scottish Home, now Caledonia House, but that is in North Riverside, very close to Ames School. And Precinct 9 has been relocated to the North Riverside Village Commons. So, and I would encourage everyone to please go to the Cook County Clerk's website to confirm your polling place, confirm your voter registration, make sure that you're able to vote on Election Day.
It's a very user-friendly site. You just go in, you type in your address, your last name. It will give you all of your voter information, exactly where you're supposed to go. You can get sample ballots that show all the offices that are up and the referendum questions that are also available. So please take a look at that. And that's all I have, Manager Francis.
Okay, I wanted to take the opportunity to congratulate there are 8 new fire recruits that graduated from the Fire Academy on February 26th. They began the academy in fall of 2017. The fire department welcomes these new recruits to the ranks of their department. We are a paid-on-call fire department, so it's always challenging. Every year we have an attrition factor, so we always have to make sure that we're getting new part-time firefighters. So we welcome them and we're excited to have them as our new addition. Additionally, I wanted to update residents and the board with regard to our WESRA application, that is the Special Rec Association that we discussed at our previous board meeting, actually our last 2 board meetings. We were able to get in our letter of intent to the board at WESRA. They did discuss it at their meeting this past week. They're excited about Riverside becoming a member. We will continue to work with them on our expedited application. The next part of the process is their finance committee reviewing our application and resources that we have to offer the agency. Ultimately, we expect to begin participation in September 2018, but we'll be bringing back future updates to the board along with various intergovernmental agreements as part of our membership for that particular association. And that's all I have to report.
And just as a follow-up to that, I met with Mayor Hermanek in North Riverside a couple of days ago, and we are going to be meeting with Supervisor Wilt of Riverside Township next week to discuss possible funding solutions and alternatives for WESRA for both Riverside and North Riverside. So it's moving apace. Next up is the approval of the consent agenda, and as you know, I must read them to you. So this week's consent agenda is the approval of the voucher list of bills for March 15, 2018. Approve the Village Board Trustee regular meeting minutes of March 1, 2018. File and review the following: the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners regular meeting minutes of November 14, 2017. The Economic Development Commission meeting minutes of January 11, 2018. Historical Commission meeting minutes of January 15, 2018. The Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes of January 24, 2018, and also the joint special meeting of February 1st, 2018. And file and review the Community Development Department February 2018 monthly report, the Finance Department January 2018 monthly report, Finance Department February 2018 monthly report, the Fire Department February 2018 monthly report, and the Police Department February 2018 monthly report. Also a resolution authorizing the provision of commission cards for Riverside Auxiliary Police Corps members and Brookfield Zoo police officers. A resolution authorizing the village manager to waive competitive bidding and enter into an agreement with Illinois Alarm Service, Inc. in the amount of $19,508 for the purchase of video cameras at the police station lobby and Pine Avenue Firehouse for consolidated dispatching purposes. A resolution authorizing the village manager to execute a contract with Paramedic Services of Illinois, Inc., PSI, for paramedic services in the village of Riverside from April 1, 2018 through March 31st, 2023. A resolution of continued support of and participation in the West Cook County Solid Waste Agency's Regional Disposal Project, and a motion to approve a memorandum of agreement between the Village of Riverside and the Fraternal Order of Police Telecommunicators. Are there any items that need to be removed for discussion by anyone? Hearing none, I'd please ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
By Mr. Ballery.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gisa. Please call the roll.
Trustee Powell.
Aye.
Trustee Gisa.
Aye.
Trustee Lumsden.
Aye.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Sutton.
Aye.
Trustee Peters.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up are reports of departments, commissions, and trustee liaisons. Are there any liaison reports this evening? Hearing none, we'll move on to I'm sorry, please, Mr. Ballery.
I just want to, the Riverside TV is just starting to put together a cooking show. So we're looking for local residents that have recipes and are not camera shy that would like to participate in that. You can go to the Riverside TV Facebook page or web page, and get solicit, get involved. So they're looking for you.
Aaron, that was. Okay. Thank you, Trustee Ballerini. Next up, we have a traffic study committee report by Chief Weitzel, Chief Buckley, and Director Bailey. This stems from the traffic safety study that was done last year by the village to try to look at various issues with regard to traffic calming, speed, cut-through traffic, a host of things that we are facing. And so we had a committee put together by these two gentlemen and also Trustee Lumsden. And so this is their report.
Thank you, President Sells. You're going to see a lot of jockeying up here between myself, Chief Buckley, and Director Bailey, because we were tasked from the manager to get together as a group, go over the study, and come up with some ideas to present to the board for 2018 and then beyond, that we could start at a pace where we could start to implement some traffic safety, some traffic calming devices throughout the village. This, by no means, is an end-all, answer-all. This is a starting point. So with that, I just want to mention briefly, I'm going to divert from that for a minute and talk about, I included the traffic safety car that you'll see in there. So I just wanted to mention that the Riverside Township gave us $7,000 to retrofit one of our older squad cars that we purchased on a grant that was unmarked and I felt was not being utilized. And a lot of feedback I got from residents is they wanted to see police officers out there doing traffic enforcement. So we have designed a high visibility squad car. Tomorrow it will be striped and it'll probably be ready for duty in about a week or so. And maybe I'll bring that to a board meeting in front of the village at a future. But that entire squad was purchased on grant funds, and everything that's retrofitting into that car is being paid for by the township. So there's nothing came out of our general budget. They were very generous in donating that money or granting us that money. And I included a sketch in there of the design. We purposely made it look differently because we want residents to know it's not just a regular patrol car. So it's not marked black and white like the rest of our fleet, and it says traffic enforcement and traffic squad on it, so you'll know when it's out there. So getting back to the study, what we really want is to see if the board is in agreement with some of these suggestions that we came up with on the study. So you should know we met several times, the three of us, and sometimes the manager was there. Sometimes she left us alone. Trustee Lumpson was there. We made on-site visits. For example, when we looked at parking boxes, I drove to River Forest on Chicago Avenue, west of Harlem. River Forest has parking boxes all the way down Chicago Avenue. So I looked at those to see how River Forest did theirs. When we looked at speed humps and trailers, we went to McCook. McCook has some over by their library and the firehouse over there. And I went to Oak Park to look at some calming devices. So we went out to the field to look at them to see if they would, what a true sense of what the operations are. Because one of the suggestions we'll make here momentarily is parking boxes. Well, some parking boxes are long shots where it's a box. Some are like the ones you see on Burling Road here that are the little T triangles. So, and Director Bailey says they can be, both. But, the village can select from those. And one of the reasons we're going to go over this is that there's going to be some significant construction going on in 2018. The first division will be done, resurfaced. There's going to be some downtown development by the railroad tracks here. So, and Woodside Road is having some work done. So, to get the best quality and to get more dollar, bang for our buck, Director Bailey says the time to do these is now when they're going to be doing these construction projects anyways. So first off, I think what I wanted to start with was we went through the study as a group, and the ones we picked out here are suggestions, and we just want to hear whether the board is supportive of them. If not, you want us to, postpone it, or you have an initiative you think might be better, I have my piece of paper here. I'm going to write down, what is supported, what you think we should do, what we should delay, maybe we should modify something. That's really what this is. This is not, we're not saying that this is what it has to be. We would prefer to have feedback from the residents or the board. So before I start, we're both going to all be up here for questions. I'll take it point by point, but I know if the Trustee Lumpson wanted to say anything before we get into our actual memorandum.
I think the only thing that I'd like to say is I do appreciate the time and effort that you guys did to go out and check, and go around. I know probably some of the neighbors around here thought that my white truck was some stalker or something, because I was doing the same thing. I know I was over in front of your house quite a bit watching out. But again, I think that these are real problems. I think these guys are addressing them head on, and I think that the lists that they've developed are very achievable. We got pretty big goals long term that we'd like to get to, but these are, I don't want to say the low-hanging fruit, but I think these are the ones that can be most impactful very quick. So I appreciate the fact that you guys took that in mind and understand that this is not an end-all. You mentioned that right out of the gate, and I appreciate that this is our first step in a long path to calm the traffic down in town.
Absolutely. So the one I'd like to go to first is the recommendation for the parking boxes we talked about on Woodside. We are recommending the parking boxes on both, which would be northbound and southbound. And we want to know if the board supports that, and if you like the box or you like those triangles that you see on Burling. And Director Bailey can tell you that there's work being done. And Ed can give you prices, ballpark, and he can also tell you what he thinks is best from his previous experience.
Definitely, like pavement markings are best to be done in quantity. The higher quantity, the lower the price. There's an opportunity to piggyback on the street resurfacing projects this year. There's a number of proposed resurfacing, pavement markings in this recommendation. For instance, if we were to create one long parking box on Woodside Road from about Park Place up to 31st Street, more or less, both sides. Last year we paid 65 cents a lineal foot for a 4-inch white line, and that's, a lot of this stuff is just 4-inch white lines or something like that. That would be about $1,700 for the parking boxes, the length of both sides of Woodside. A couple other areas that we're planning to do some work on is like Berry Point Road will be resurfaced. That will have a broken yellow line, called the center line a lot of times. That will not be in the middle of the street because there's parking already on one side, so it's going to be shifted to, off center. And we have a proposal here to include parking boxes on Woodside Road. Notably about village streets, good and bad thing, I guess, they're not, they're narrow, they're not conventional streets. One of the things we always want to try to do is comply with the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices that sets certain standards for different pavement markings, where they should be placed, how they should be placed, and the width and so on and so forth. Sometimes we're not going to be able to achieve that because streets are too narrow. But one of the things is this study, or what our recommendation is definitely trying to do, and I think that's one of the things that was an emphasis of the traffic study, was traffic calming devices. Yellow broken lines, parking boxes, a few other things are traffic calming. People see those, and the kind of their field of vision kind of narrows. They tend to want to slow down a little bit. On southbound Woodside, just as you approach the intersection with Park Place, we're planning to embed traffic delineators, these little puck things that you see that are reflectorized, to help guide people through that. That's a tough intersection there. A lot of different geometry, I guess you could say. So anyway, if we were to implement all of these recommendations that we have identified, that would cost about $6,000. About $4,000 for pavement markings, subject to bidding. If we were to piggyback on the street projects, we have 2 of them going at separate times. we might be able, that might be lower, but generally speaking, let's say if it's $4,000, the street signage recommendations are about $2,000, and that's primarily the park zone signs and some four-way stops.
So, Mr. Bailey, so the parking boxes, that the pricing that you gave us, are those the T's or are those the long?
What I'm considering is the long boxes, so to speak. We could call these in the photograph, we could all call those T's. Right. Parking.
Is there any showing that the long boxes are more effective?
I thought that the traffic study really kind of referenced those recommending those.
As well.
And I think those are better for traffic calming, it's just my sense. But anything you can put on the pavement that gets people's attention, that maybe the road isn't as wide as they thought it was, and maybe they ought to slow down because jeepers, the parking.
So the $6,000 is the full boxes?
For all of the pavement markings proposed in this recommendation,
right,
more or less.
Right. Okay.
So that price would be even the suggestion we made about putting the speed limit signs as you come in, like 20 mph, that's included in the overall price.
Those are about $500 each.
But we wanted to, find out if the board supported the parking boxes. Michael Worthman, when I talked to him, thought that the longer shot parking boxes are better because people think that's a parking lane and they'll go over because they see it all the way down the block. So that was his opinion.
That leads into my question, and that is with the parking. I know on Woodside, part of the problem on Woodside is some people think it's a two-lane street, and some people think it's a one-lane street. And obviously, the parking boxes would show people that it's a one-lane street. Would it be a ticketable offense if someone traveled in the parking box lane?
Yeah, there is a statute. There is an Illinois statute for driving in designated parking lane.
So then that would be a violation, so
Yes.
it'd be clear that it's one lane. My second question is, and maybe this is for future consideration, is did the traffic study or did the committee look at curb bump outs at the beginning and end of each parking lane, parking lane?
I'm aware that those are recommendations in the traffic study. We're not proposing those at this point. They're quite, they're expensive. And they're part of some plans, like on East Quincy Street. If that one is rehabbed, there would be parking bump outs there. But we recognize or acknowledge that those types of recommendations are deeper into the traffic study. And like the chief suggested, where this is our starting point, and if we were to implement some of these things, kind of see how they go, see what works maybe, and then from my standpoint, move into the more complex, heavier duty things. Less easy to change also.
How often do you have to repaint the lines or the?
Thermoplastic pavement markings have I'll call it an expected life of 3 to 5 years. So in that case, if we're putting in $6,000 worth of traffic pavement markings this year, we could expect that those same pavement markings we would expect to pay $6,000 3 to 5 years from now for just those. We have a lot of pavement markings. One of the things that we're going to start implementing also this year is the ladder type crosswalks. Those are more high visibility. Those will primarily be involved or included with the resurfacing projects like a Forest Avenue. But that's another traffic calming item. High visibility, it tells people from a further distance out, oh, by the way, there's a crosswalk here. Those, and those will cost money to maintain. All pavement markings will. We have a lot of them throughout the village, so this is, maybe $20,000 every year, every couple of years that we could be budgeting to refresh existing pavement markings. So that's a good point, that these things that even signs, even street signs, so far this year, just kind of a departmental initiative, We've replaced about 70, maybe 80 street signs in the village, faded, so on and so forth. And I don't have the cost exactly, but that's a real maintenance item too that we shouldn't discount, that all these things are recurring expenses once you implement them.
Is that something that we do ourselves, or something we outsource it? Is there a reason we can't do it ourselves? Or?
We change all the signs ourselves. We don't have the equipment to install thermoplastic pavement markings. I'm not sure that, well, I haven't looked into it. That's fairly unusual, I think, for a smaller public works department to be installing those, yeah.
I doubt we could justify that cost of the machinery for the,
Yeah.
even though
I was thinking more of the
double
paint. I
that
was thinking more of the
price.
painting.
Yeah.
We painted traditionally, we're moving more into thermoplastics in the last few years, but paint lasts months instead of years.
Again, I kind of want to comment a little bit, Doug, on what you said, and we had some good discussions about this. To me is like, let's get these things done now because they're very achievable within the current money we have, and then they don't prevent us from adding curb pop-outs where they make sense as the road designers go through town and continue to work and upgrade our storm system and our roadway system. I think the other thing that's a pretty interesting deal about going, I think the best thing in this is going and instituting a 20-mile-an-hour kind of across the village. And again, there was some interesting, every time I came back from anywhere, I used GPS as well as Waze as well as Google Maps to get home. And all of them take you into Riverside. If you're going to Oak Brook Mall from Midway, they drive you right through Riverside. And what we kind of figured out is if we can have the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit as the posted speed limit, those folks will change their software, and I think it'll drive less traffic to use their Waze to come through. Because right now, if you were at Midway Airport and you type in downtown Riverside, it takes you right by your guys' house every time. Even though that might not be the fastest way, because of the way the speed limits are, that's the way it's posted and that's the way that data is driven. So this is a pretty low-hanging fruit for a pretty economic, talking $8,000. When we were having these discussions about this before, we were talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for all this stuff, right? And so I'm very pleased with the list of things that we can get done, by spring potentially or right away.
I didn't realize we were considering uniform 20-mile-per-hour throughout the village. Is that
We're
in
not.
there?
No, I mean, this would be the school and park zones.
Right.
So, I mean,
Not for the
it
whole
will
village.
have the effect of having the 20-mile-an-hour signs much more prevalent
Right.
within the community.
It's also worth noting that we have a number of our streets are what's called Federal Aid Urban or FAU routes. They're eligible for STP funding, which you know that you've been taking action on. Those have control from IDOT, and certainly IDOT pays 60, 70, 80% of the cost for these streets. They have a minimum speed limit of 25 miles per hour on those streets. And that's Long Common, for example, Long Common, Forest, Woodside Road. Those are all FAU routes. So as we walk through this or work through this, there's other regulations out there that come into play for some of the streets in the village.
The nice thing, though, to pick up on what Trustee Lumpson said, is given the number of parks and schools and spaces we have, just doing that will have a significant calming effect once people get within the town. And hopefully it will, to your point, it will start to dissuade people and they'll find faster routes. Anything from this side of the room? Any questions over here?
Question, is the plan to take the markings all the way to the curb, or just to leave the T on toward the curb?
Well, where we install new parking boxes, I don't think Riverside literally has any parking boxes right now. So we're specifically talking about Woodside Road, both sides of Woodside Road. So it would be a box that begins near the intersection of, let's say we're northbound on Woodside Road. Near the intersection of Park Place, that box that, one leg of it would go out about 8 feet from the curb and then go all the way 8 feet from the curb all the way to near 31st Street.
Yeah, I understand that, but are you gonna create car-size spaces with the solid lines on front and back? No, okay, that's
just,
good.
it's just a box,
Just a
open, empty box.
open, empty, but not with little,
Not in, not in.
not even little T's, okay.
And that's, I mean, we see those around. I mean, those are fairly
Yeah.
common to see. I don't know if there's any thoughts from the police department about that kind of stuff, but that's the concept of parking boxes, is it's just basically an empty box.
Yeah, the ones I saw in River Forest was an empty box. It just at the beginning of the box, they had like a sharrow that showed you, you know, that it's going to come to a box.
Yeah.
But the one at Chicago Avenue was a straight box, and then would come to the end of the next cross street, and then they would start at the next cross street on Chicago Avenue, and they'd have these little sharrows that would just point you, you know, don't drive through the box type of thing. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, Chief. Does the committee talk at all about sharrows, you know, just like with the bicycles that would, especially maybe like on Delaplane and Long Common, that would let people know that these were also bike routes?
we didn't specifically address that in this, but Director Bailey, he can talk. He's a proponent of it, I can tell you.
As am I.
It came up in conversation. We acknowledge it as a recommendation. As I recall, we did not decide to do anything on those streets that they recommended sharrows for, or we decided that, let's see how this initial amount of pavement markings go, but you know, it's recommended in the study, and it's really a good opportunity for feedback, I think, from the village board, whether or not you'd like to see those.
Again, we talked a little bit about that because at the same time that we met, at least the meeting that I had a chance to participate with them, we hadn't figured out the routes yet.
Well, there are already 3 designated routes that are in place, so we do know where those routes are. The only thing that we're still working on is the Salt Creek cut through.
Connection.
But yeah, my recommendation would be the existing routes that we have, you know, the Palmer, the Wright, and the Olmsted, that we should consider either using the sharrows to designate those, or what I think might be a better solution would be to look at redoing our directional signage for cyclists, because right now, although we have 3 separate routes, the only thing we have in our town now are those little green arrows. That doesn't help a cyclist determine which route he or she might be on. So I would say either look at the sharrows or find some way to make it more clear where our bike routes are, both to cyclists and to people driving. Are there any thoughts about that?
The existing signage, as you know, is provided by like a grant or from the county or something like that. I forgot exactly how that was provided, but I think we installed them, but they were provided to us.
I mean, I think it could be something is because, you know, on the bike route maps, they're color coded. The routes themselves are color coded. It could be something as simple as using different colored arrows, so that people would know how to stay on a given route. However, having said that, I don't know that has the vehicle calming effect that the sharrow would have and if we're going to have this entryway, 25 mile per hour, it might make sense to have the sharrow in conjunction with that, just to let, and again, I would only do it on the designated routes, because you've got some entry points here that are not part of the bike routes. So I would only look at doing it on the designated bike routes.
So those pavement markings, the sharrows, they run the whole distance like a bike route, correct? Sure. So we'd have to get new pricing. Sure. Which if you did that on all 3 routes would just would be a significant increase?
I don't know.
My understanding is that you don't have multiples of them. My understanding is that you just have basically at the entry point coming in. Okay. So basically where the 25 mile an hour one on the pavement would be, you would have one there.
Okay.
Showing that this is a shared lane, and then because that way you kind of get all that in one spot.
I think they repeat as reinforcement periodically, depending on how long the length of the route is. But it's definitely mentioned in the study as a traffic calming thing. For one thing, certainly it helps bicyclists. But all those are messages, of course, to the motorists that something is going on here. So I should be on alert for something, maybe I should slow down.
I have a question about Woodson, sorry. So on the bump outs, on what are those, I'm just curious, what are those, we've been able to do with those costs? No? Because on the bump, is Woodside a 2-lane street or is it a one-lane street? No.
You know, it's probably a 2-lane street, but we don't restrict parking there right now. So, yeah, when there's no cars parked there, it's definitely a 2-lane. You've seen people do that. I don't think it was supposed to be that way.
Because when I drop my daughter off at school, I get passed every single day and drive me nuts. So I'm just thinking about this, and that's great, but if there were bump outs, I feel like that would really,
yeah.
Maybe
that's something we could look at.
But again, I think
when
they too.
Yeah.
If it has the triangle to.
Might be something to look at next year, right? Because the bump outs will require us to do curbing.
Yeah, curbs, gutters, changes the flow rates, all that stuff. So, and again, like I said, that's when we get into that, I think it makes the most fiscal responsibility sense to put that into the design requirements as they move forward and start to rework the streets.
They would rework the street, yeah.
Because otherwise we're going to put in a curb or something, we'll trap some water, and then we'll have a slip issue, and those things can domino out of pretty darn quick. So, but again, I think that if they have the arrow that starts off the parking lane, and then it becomes a parking lane, if we drop a bicycle symbol in there or not, I don't think that's nor here nor there. I think it's probably a good opportunity. But I think the key there is it also gives these guys at police an opportunity. If they see somebody doing that pass, then they have the opportunity to police it and ticket them, right? Right now, it's so confusing, you really couldn't do that, right? You know, so again, I think it gets more tools in these guys' toolbox to slow people down. I think if we trust what the traffic engineers told us, and we think we see proof in that, in the fact that with a few lines out there, it's going to slow the traffic down, that's going to help a lot. I think once we slow the traffic down, that'll help reduce the cut-through traffic, which adds to it. And I think then that'll keep them from cutting all the way through town, back and forth, and this becoming their new habit.
Yeah. I also think that what Trustee Lumsden said about the 20-mile-per-hour zone, the fact that you're applying that to the technology, the apps that are out there, I mean, that's a really interesting concept. And I don't know if there's any data out there on that, but it'd be interesting to see if that really would change that. Because if it would, that's a fantastic idea.
So I'm taking notes here. I'm going to have Chief Buckley. Go ahead.
Mr. Bellingham.
Ed, when you said that certain roads have to be 25 mile an hour, like the Long Common, what is that? What effect does that have on the park zones? Because along Long Common, you have a whole big ballpark, and it kind of creeps into St. Mary's School.
Well, I'm expecting we can still have park zones, or we have school zones already on different streets. But as you're entering Long Common from Harlem Avenue, the street sign says 25 miles per hour, and it's 25 miles per hour. I think unless you have it decreased for some other reason.
So as an example, in the techno geek and driving around like I have been, if you come in from Woodside, you come down, you'll be able to go 25 till you get to the school zone. That'll slow them down there. If you're coming in from Harlem and you're coming down Long Common, you'll be able to do 25 until you get to the park. And then you get slowed down, and then you bump into the schools. So pretty much right when you get to that part, it's all 20 all the way to the downtown. The only side that we don't really have a good opportunity unless we call the whole area along Riverside Road a park, that one's still, I believe Riverside Road is at one of our...
I think it's an FAU route also.
Yeah, if that's the route, then that's the only one that we can't get by using the park or that, unless that's designated as a park along the river there, which is kind of nice. I think we could do it.
I use it as a park.
There you go. I do too. There's two of us that use it as a park. Then we could install 20-mile-an-hour signs there, and we would achieve the same purpose that we want on the entrance over the bridge. When you come in on Berry Point, you're right into the Presbyterian school zone right there. And Swan Pond is a park on the other side, and if you would happen to turn and go the other direction down toward Indian Gardens, that can be a 20-mile-an-hour as well for using the park angle. So I think that gives us a really good opportunity for these guys to put the signs in, to slow the traffic down, and then, like I said, I think the data will eventually catch up because it tracks people that are connected back to it, and it'll start showing that they're having to drive slower, and then that'll eventually get it mowed down to when it drops off the map.
Yeah. That's great.
Because like on Waze, when we had the big tent up on Riverside Road, it started to, a few times, not direct us down Lionel. And it took you straight down Ogden and made you turn in on Berry Point, when we really had it bogged down right there. So somehow that mechanism is tracking, so when we plug it up for whatever
Maybe
reason.
we should just start calling every day.
Yeah.
Reporting the slowdown.
So again, I think we just need to kind of implement these things and keep working at it.
Did you
Yes, a couple things. I think, I assume we're going out to bid for the striping, and if so, I say, why not get the cost on the sharrows and see if we want to do it at that point. I'm generally supportive of
You
that.
guys are saying sharrows, just so I'm clear. Are you just talking stamping the bicycle logo in there?
Right.
Yeah, okay, because the arrow itself is kind of the thing that moves people over, and then they just stamp the bicycle logo. And I do think you're right. I think there's a requirement to every so often, you might have 2 or 3 of them on each side of Woodside, if that's our
And
bike
we
path.
would look at the MUTCD, manual uniform control bicycle, and you recommend that kind of stuff probably as an interval for those types of
Also, I think it's important, and Chief Weitzel could address this, that the public understand the law around speed limits, specifically that the default is 25 unless you have a traffic study or park or school zone.
That's correct.
So we can't just make the whole village 20 miles per hour. That would be a violation of state law.
We looked at the possibility of that, and so the folks who have been following us know this. We would have to do more studies. There are a number of boxes basically you have to tick off, and then the state can grant you that. So it would be a very, and plus it's complicated by the routes, the SDP routes that you were talking about. So I mean, this is as close as we can get, basically, to try to. I'm intrigued by this notion of a new park along Riverside.
I'm not done fighting to get 20 miles an hour throughout the whole town. And then because then you just do it, you put the sign up in the front, and it says town is 20 mile an hour unless otherwise posted. And then on these routes here, you put 25 mile an hour signs up, and we have far less signs around town.
I would prefer that
and
as well.
Preservationist folks and historic folks prefer less signs and more signs. And then anybody's going over 20, you give them a 7-8 mile an hour variance because of speed guns and stuff. And anybody driving over 30, you got the opportunity to blow up. So I haven't given up on that one yet.
Good.
When you have a park zone, it's 50 feet before the park, you can start the 20 mile an hour sign? Or is there something specific, or is that fungible, or?
That
we're going to minimum.
Usually what is recommended is there's a park warning sign, park zone warning sign, and then the speed limit sign. We're going to just install the speed limit sign just as a matter of the sign issue, the clutter of signs. But I don't know right offhand what it is as far as in advance of the park zone. But for example, on southbound along Common, as you approach the intersection with North Delaplane, there's a big ballpark there, park zone. So we'll have one further up along Common. I don't know the exact placement right offhand, but Harrington Park also on North Delaplane, there's no signage at all there. So in advance, going both north and south on those streets, just for example.
And again, I think if we can slow them down right there by Harrington, we're talking about, that's going to make it less enticing to come in Lionel, turn right there and shoot out past your place, go up over the railroad tracks and make that big loop all the way around, right? Because that's where I saw most of the people that were zooming through town, for lack of better terms. That was one of the big cut-through routes, especially after they put the tent up. Instead of going Lionel this way, they were all going Lionel north.
Okay, what's next?
Matt, why don't we take these two?
So one of the things in the study was regarding putting up a stop sign on Burling Road in front of the library at the crosswalk. We looked at that area a lot. There's a couple different things we do. One, very easily put up a stop sign there. Another thing would be putting up pedestrian crossing signs, stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk. But one of the other things we saw about that was that crosswalk is on an angle. Maybe reconfiguring that crosswalk so it's a direct crosswalk straight across the street instead of an angle, which keeps the pedestrians in the street a little bit longer, along with some signage, whether they be stop sign or a pedestrian crossing sign to stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk. So that was on Burling. We also
Can I mention on that one? Because what I see there a lot is, I think what confuses people is when they come up to that spot, they think that the driveway that goes into the library is a road. And so you see people stop and they're confused because they don't really know they're supposed to continue around and make that curve. So could you, I mean, I think the stop sign is a good idea, again, for the calming, but I wonder if some kind of directional sign is to actually show that people the direction they're supposed to go. Because obviously everybody who lives here knows, but it's the cut-through people that they're confused, and then you see them slam their brakes on right there, and I'm surprised we haven't had more rare.
And not only do they want to go straight, but they also want to make the turn onto Burling, the right-hand turn there, and we see a lot of people start the turn and then realize that they can't go that way. So, you know, I think a stop sign and the reconfiguring of the crosswalk there a little bit would help with that area.
Is there an issue with the stop sign and the train tracks? Is that why there's not one there right now?
It seems like that could easily back up to the train tracks if you have any traffic coming in front of the library.
There was discussion, so if you recall, that was part of when we were looking at doing the enhancements for the East Quincy streetscape, was somewhat reconfiguring that particular crosswalk to create that stop sign area and then do streetscaping as well by the bank and what have you. So when Michael Worthman from Calaway looked at that, he said no, because you have to remember, you have the same, you probably have more distance on the other side of the tracks by Burlington than you would to Riverside Road. So to be cognizant of that. And he also said that is a traffic calming mechanism because you're stopping people after they go over the tracks versus having a free flow of traffic coming down over southbound on the tracks and onto Riverside Road.
Where that one's going to be really interesting to watch is when after the train leaves.
Yeah.
Because right now we'll back all the way up past the library, all the way up to the swim club almost. When the train's, you know, 8 o'clock in the morning for that rush to the school, they'll back all the way up there, and then when the train track opens up, you can't turn to go that direction. So that will solve that every other car thing at that intersection there, which I think will really help get that flowed through much quicker than it does right now.
The other area of concern that they brought up for adding additional stop signs and making them four-way stops was the intersection of Long Common and Addison, as well as the intersection of Bartram and Nuttall. Currently, there's two-way stops there. Long Common does not have a stop sign up, but there is a stop sign on Addison at Long Common. And there is not a stop sign on Nuttall, but there is one on Bartram on both sides. We've had a few accidents there, and we did receive a few correspondence regarding that intersection, that there are a lot more kids either walking to Central Hauser and also walking to St. Mary's that utilize that intersection a lot. And there were some concerns about that. It was recommended in the study, and that also is going to help slowing down traffic on both Nuttall as well as Long Common.
You know, I also, when we had the tent up and you were running traffic through, you put a four-way stop at Gage and Cowley. And it used to be somewhat temporary. Now it looks somewhat permanent. Is that is now staying?
I'll defer that one to Ed. I believe that one is still temporary. It hasn't been removed yet.
Yeah, that was installed as part of the lining project, detour project, which is not completed, and they're still obviously, when they do start up again, they'll be on Riverside Road. So I'm aware that that is a four-way stop now. Again, it was just temporary because of the amount of traffic we were running through there. Not we, the contractor. But I think, you know, from my experience, personal experience, I think that's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
to make it permanent.
Yeah. I go through there all the time. I find it a lot easier.
5 houses from the corner, and neighbors have thanked me for getting the stop sign there. So I would.
So you might want to leave it there so that the neighbors aren't mad at it.
Yeah, then they'll be. So the converse is true too. So.
Well, if that is, we can add it to the list because that will make it a permanent fixture. Right now, it's still the temporary.
What's interesting about that is a perfect test for us. When we do slow things down a little bit, it does start to.
Oh, I've traveled through there and I've seen it slowing cars down in that intersection.
And I've seen cars drive, you know, through the ladies' bushes several times.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that's
That used to be a dangerous intersection,
Yeah.
that one that those signs were installed on, I think.
Yeah, so I like those stop signs, so those should be made permanent.
We addressed the high visibility crosswalk, that's going to do those. The real difference in that is the ladders in between, not just the two stripes and the thermoplast that you talked about. I'm going to defer this next one to Matt. He did a lot of research on the Aikenside Delaplane area and what suggestions we had.
So, Aikenside, Delaplane, and Woodside. It was brought up in the study as one of a dangerous intersection, and the reason for it.
Can I interrupt
Yes.
just a second? Right after the ladder crosswalks, there's a recommendation about, are you going to be talking about Kim Bark and Park Place? Is that what you're getting ready to address?
No, I was going to drop that to the last because Director Bailey put a proposal
I just
there.
wanted to talk about that.
Dollars I wanted you to look
Okay.
at it.
All right, I'm sorry.
So we started looking at different options we could use at that intersection. It's a dangerous intersection, especially during the rush hour times, drop-offs at schools in the mornings and afternoons, with vehicles that are traveling northbound on Woodside. And as they get up to the stop sign right at Delaplane, the traffic that is coming southbound on Desplaines onto Woodside makes the left-hand turn into Riverside, and you have to try to guess whether they're going to go down Aikenside or go down Delaplane. One of the things we looked at that intersection was ways we could either eliminate some cut through there or direct it in a certain way, whether it be down Woodside, Aikenside, or Delaplane. One of the things I looked at when I went out there and started looking at that intersection was a lot of traffic comes down Aikenside, especially in the mornings and afternoons. Currently, Hauser and Central park a lot of cars on Aikenside. So once you get down by Hauser, it bottlenecks. It gets very tough down there to get through. So one of the things I looked at and recommended was doing a temporary trial of shutting down Aikenside at Delaplane on the side of that island from the Delaplane side to the going south to where it comes into Woodside. That would alleviate the cut-through traffic coming down Aikenside, and it would redirect it to either Delaplane or Woodside. Are we moving a problem from one street to another? I think Delaplane and Woodside are better off handling more of that traffic than Aikenside is, especially with the school being there, the backside of the school. But we were considering, possibly putting up temporary Jersey barriers, redirecting traffic with some signage, and giving it a trial run to see what happens, to see how the flows increase on other streets, or if it does alleviate some of those issues further down Aikenside.
So would you barricade it on both ends of the triangle?
Yes, and any traffic leaving town coming down Aikenside would turn around the island and go onto Woodside to go either north or south.
I like your idea of temporary.
Right, because we don't know what it's going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, we could create more problems. We fix one thing and create a bigger problem somewhere else.
That I really like. What concerns me is, I think, and the study shows that a lot of people turn off of Woodside and go right up Delaplane. And they go up Delaplane and they get to Delaplane and Long Common by the park, and they shoot up Long Common, and they're trying to bypass 26th Street. And I mean, there's 4,000 cars going up and down North Delaplane. So that's a real problem. So I think we need to try to address that North Delaplane issue. The other thing that worries me a little bit about Aikenside is when you come into town, you have to know whether, if you want to get into town to go to the grocery store, go to the restaurants or whatever, if you can't get on Aikenside, you can't get on Woodside because you never know whether it's a one-way or two-way when you get into town, because you never know what's going on with the school. So I just worry that that's going to end up choking somewhat our downtown unless we let the Woodside be two-way in front of the school. And I know that's probably a long shot. So that's what worries me about that.
Yeah.
Well, right now they go down like Kimbark, and then you got to take a left.
Well, right now,
Or a right and go around, and then
I think right now,
come back.
I think right now they go down Aiken side.
Well, but I think what we're addressing are two different groups of people. I mean, the people that make that turn and go down Delaplane, like, are what they're trying to do exactly what you're saying. They're trying to avoid 26. People going down Aiken side, they're the ones trying to get to Riverside and Miller to get out to Ogden. And if you remember, that was actually the worst of, according to the traffic study that surprised all of us, was the amount of the volume that going through there. So did you consider doing like we do at Lionel? Did you consider having a no turn during, because really we're talking in the mornings, right? That's really the critical time.
Pretty much throughout the day also. With the bottleneck comes when they get down closer to the school with all the cars parked on Aiken side. It gets very narrow.
But isn't it more of a rush hour kind of phenomenon? Or
it is, and it's both in the mornings and in the evenings also.
I mean, granted, then you're back to an enforcement issue. But if you had no left turn now, and we've talked about this, and this is where it gets very complicated very fast, because if you tried to have no left turn onto Delaplane or to Aiken side, if that was what your goal was. Now you have to go all the way down Woodside and not let people make U-turns, because otherwise they're going to go down, make a U-turn and come back up and turn. And then you also would have to have a no right turn onto Northgate, because people would use that as the alternate route. So you have to, if you do the no left turn, you've got to implement all of those other things too, to stop the workarounds, right?
And one thing we do, like I said, could create a bigger problem.
That's always the...
That's what I like about the temporary.
A barrier to no left turn, or starting off with just taking the one leg of the triangle off on Aiken side, is a great starter.
Right.
Kind of like we deal with it during the school hours on Woodside, where we take it to one way, right?
So if I'm coming from Loyola and I want to get into town at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, how do I get into town? I can't go down Aiken side anymore, right?
You could use either Delaplane or Woodside.
Yeah, but Delaplane's going to take me not downtown.
It takes you to Northwood. I mean, it's just a block or two to Northwood.
But then we're just moving the traffic to Northwood.
But we're moving it away from the school.
Yeah, but that's, I think I think Aiken side is an important street to have open for our business district, because that's the only direct route. And I think over and over in this study, you see, you want to keep your routes open to your CBD, and we're closing it.
Well, that's why I'm suggesting a timed closing. Only do it in the morning.
What I would suggest is speed bump on Aiken side. That's the spot where I would use one of these calming traffic, because that slows the traffic down on a residential street, but still allows people to use it to get into town. The traffic, the cars that are parked in Aiken side, those school park, I think that, again, I think that's wonderful. I park my car on Delaplane just to slow the cars on Delaplane once in a while. So I don't think that's not a negative thing, but that's where I would think maybe one of those calming bumps would help, rather than trying to shut down that thing, because it would become very difficult to get into town, because then we'd be moving the cars to Northwood, and then you got another issue, or move them over to Nuttall, and then you got another issue, and then it just gets more and more confusing on how to get into town.
Do you remember from the traffic study, because I know they did the traffic counts by time, my memory is that the big problem with that route, the Aiken side, Riverside Road, Miller, was in the mornings, because that's also the time that we most want to protect the kids, because I mean, one of the things that worries me are the people cutting through town on their phones through a school zone. So that's why I was wondering if the no left turn, just like we do it at Lionel, but maybe only do it in the mornings, like.
And if you're concerned about, prohibiting or inhibiting traffic flow to the central business district, you have to think of the businesses that are open during when school is starting for the morning. We have the dry cleaners that's open, obviously, and then the banks don't open till a little later in the morning. So we have essentially Riverside Foods and the dry cleaners first thing in the morning, and Fleur.
Like 7 to 9 or 7 to 10, something like that. Because what I like about that is we're actually killing two birds. Because you're stopping the people that are using the Aiken side, Riverside, Miller, and you're also stopping people that are using Delaplane. And my thinking is if you're not letting the people who live on Delaplane, at that first section of Delaplane right when you turn in, they're not likely coming home at 7 and 10 o'clock in the morning, so you're not impacting our residents.
I don't get how you're changing the impact on Delaplane.
Because you wouldn't let people turn it off. You would have no left turn off of this lane.
It would force everybody to go down.
So you're saying no left turn at all, not just the Aiken side?
Right, I'm saying you can't turn on the Delaplane or the Aiken side from 7 to 10.
I would agree with that.
Because again, that if you do a no left turn there, that'll totally get rid of that other chaos there, where they're coming this way down, southbound on Woodside, and turning to go to Delaplane, and you're trying to go north to get out of town to go to work. That's where that mess happens.
How do people get to their homes that live there?
Or does it only be in the morning? It'd be from 7
to 9. They
7 to 9 in the morning.
And there are other,
during the week.
So as Joe said, if they're going to work out of Loyola, then they can't get home.
They could turn up back just past 26th, where that bus stop is. I don't know what road that is. Northgate?
Northgate, yeah, Northgate.
there are other communities that implement this that are right by schools.
But that's not what you're saying.
No, that was one of
I
our
agree with what you're saying, but that's not what he said. But
And
yeah, I
that's
agree with
a
that.
suggestion,
100%.
but, you know, I think we are definitely open to try anything. And some things we may try for a month or 2 months or longer and see how they work and say, you know what, let's try it again.
Yeah. But even with what you said, I still think Aiken side would be a road that could handle one of those calming things.
You know, if we did the signage, it'd have to be like they do on Lionel, and the people that live on Lionel can tell you it works great when the officer's sitting there. And when the officer's not, it's not so great, but people do learn patterns, so there's probably some impact. But I know Matt and Director Bailey and I talked that if we were to do the Aiken site block off, we would have to put something significant there or people were moving. So they were suggesting like those Jersey, what are they called? Barriers. And then that's, you know, part of our evaluation would be how much manpower intensive and labor, because somebody would have to put it up at 7, right? And then take it back down at 9 and put it back up at 4 and then take it down at 6. 6 would be a problem if it was a public works responsibility, because that wouldn't be their shift. And, you know, us moving those would be based on calls for service and stuff, but because we just couldn't, we agreed that if we put something flimsy there, people are just going to move it and they're just going to drive through it. So it'd have to be, if we were actually blocking the road, there'd have to be something significant there to prevent it from being removed.
I think we need to try something at that intersection, and I would think that we would try blocking off Aiken side altogether for a period of time, not just during rush hour, and see what happens. You know, people who live on Aiken side can go south of that intersection. I'm looking at an aerial photo of it. Can go south to the south end of the triangle and then turn left and go to their homes.
But that's what the country street traffic's they're gonna find.
Well, maybe they will, maybe it won't work, but I think you'll get less. I don't understand why people use Aiken side to get to downtown. It's a local residential street. The quickest and the path of least resistance to get downtown is to go straight down Woodside to Kimbark to Forest.
I agree, but now the fastest time is Woodside in front of the school, right in downtown.
Actually, I've timed it out. It's quicker to go to Kimbark and then turn left, at least from my experience.
But I never know what's going on in front of the school. I never know when that street is open, and I live here.
Well,
and then you drive in and there's cars parked facing you. You know, where you'd be driving and you're like,
I take Kimbark even on a Saturday because it's quicker than the turns you have to make when you cut in front of the schools. But I think we need to try something, and I'm supportive of what they've recommended. We got to try it for a pretty extended period of time, though, to see so people get used to it. Initially, it'll be chaos because people aren't used to it, so you've got to let it go for a while and then evaluate.
I guess I remain concerned, though, that because everybody has the applications that Trustee Lumsden's talking about. So if you shut off Akenside, and that was how I used to go to get to Riverside Road. All I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the Delaplane, go to Northwood and turn right, and go right back down there and go right back at where the school is to get back on my route again. That'd be the first thing that they do. So that's why it seems to me that you're not going to be able to stop the Akenside cut through unless you stop the Delaplane cut through. It seems that you've got to block both of those entrances in the mornings. I'm not sure you would need anything in the afternoons, people coming the other direction. But I think if you had no left turn during the 7 to 9, now granted, it would require, for the first several weeks, it would require a lot of enforcement to let people see that it was serious.
I agree 100%, because coming down Woodside, people get to that stop sign and they creep out, and then somebody comes around and flies in front of them, and then it's always and then they're trying to get from the left lane over to the right lane on Woodside, because the left lane's all backed up because it's all turning down 31st Street. So I agree. We stopped all that traffic from turning in off of 31st. That would be, I think that'd be huge.
So that would be an issue, just a morning issue, 7 to 9?
I mean, I think we'd have to look at the data. That's my memory, is that the traffic
with
data was...
signage and then enforcement at the beginning, and then, so we're not talking about any blocking, we're talking about signage with enforcement, and then, enforcement depends on, I mean, the first couple of weeks, we can make it a detail. We can assign somebody there, but outside of that, then it becomes where all we have officers available to do that.
I mean, I suppose in the early going, when you first put the no turn sign up, you could just barricade that median so that people could not turn left.
Okay, so they couldn't turn left at all. So either Akenside or
so you would just barricade the median that's on Woodside.
Extend
where people now turn, block that. Go ahead and put the sign up, and then block it so that people are forced to
go straight.
See that there is now no left turn there.
And that would be a temporary...
Yeah, do that for like a week or two and then do the enforcement. But to try to break people's habit. But again, you're going to have a situation where if it's flimsy, people are going to move it.
Certainly we can, as Director Bailey said, we can try anything, monitor it and see what I do believe it has to be there for a little bit to get the message out. But yeah, I think, if that's what the board supports, we can make it happen and do it, certainly monitor it.
I think this would also, though, call for some public outreach. I think that we need to, contact the folks who live. I really don't think, I think there's only one home that would be affected on Akenside that's right there on the other side of the triangle. I think the people most affected by this would be the folks that live right there on Delaplane, to see what their feeling is about stopping traffic coming in by them from 7 to 9, whether that's going to be a serious disruption of their family habits. I have a feeling they're going to jump at it and welcome it.
Yeah, I mean, if they're coming, you said if they're coming from Loyola and they're coming southbound, or they're coming from the country club or something like that, they're going to be coming down. They can turn onto Northgate and come in and back around that way if it's in that 2-hour period, and it wouldn't inconvenience them. They probably do that already.
Or they can go down 26 and come in on Westover.
So we'd have to do some outreach, maybe do some type of letter to the residents there and have our CSO walk the area and deliver it to the homes. They could either, make a comment through internet or whatever they could do. And when Director Bailey said we'd have to really research what type of barricade to put up there temporarily.
Liz and Mike, what are your thoughts on this one? This is a big change.
I don't use that intersection as much. I'm up on Northgate. Actually, Northgate is starting to become of a problem too. I don't know if you guys know that.
Yeah.
So I'm a little worried because we're talking about directing.
Well, see, in order to make this work, you have to have no right turn on the Northgate going north at the same time. Because otherwise they're going to make a U-turn.
Right, so you're
And then
gonna
go
say
back
that
up.
people who are going north can't turn right into North Gate?
From 7 to 9. Because otherwise,
Yeah.
that's the only way you're going to stop people from finding a workaround.
So how does anyone get in from the west side?
Northgate.
Northgate, because
But
you're
you
coming
can't at
southbound.
7 to 9.
Yeah, but you're coming southbound.
Southbound. But you can't if you're coming from 31st. You'd have to be coming
No,
from.
but
Right.
what she's talking about, if you dropped your kids off at school and you want to drive back up and turn right onto Northgate.
You can't get home.
I can't, yeah.
Unless we think that Northgate's so attenuated that people would not use that as a cut around if we do
See, I don't
this.
think, I think the people that are using, when I take that route, they're coming up 31st, and it's just amazing how many people come up 31st, turn around, and then just go right up Delta Point.
Yeah, that little
Yeah,
chicane
jog,
right
it's
there to get
crazy.
going home, yeah.
And the traffic shows that they're going straight across, like in front of Paul's house. He had 4,000 people down along Big Ballpark, and then they shoot up Long Common because they're trying to skip that whole area. So
At
we need
26th
them-
Street.
So we need them to turn down Woodside or Des Plaines and go down to 26 where they belong, and then take a right. And
But my question is how do you stop them from then using Northgate as the cut through?
They're not gonna cut through with
They're not gonna
Northgate.
do a U-turn.
Northgate has to come up and around and then down again. They're not gonna wanna do that.
I mean, I hope that if,
Right.
well,
At
we
least
try.
I wouldn't even wanna
Well,
do
we
that.
try
I'd
it,
go up
and
there.
then if we see an increase of.
And that's exactly, start with something first, see how it goes, monitor it very closely, especially during those times, and then if we do see a lot of that traffic making that right turn, we could probably see it pretty quickly
that's
during
why
those
temporary
hours,
is the right answer.
Yeah.
Temporary is the right way to do this.
which could become permanent.
Yeah, and if it works, then we put in a public works program and we design it properly, and drainage and all that other good stuff.
Okay.
All right, then a couple last items. The traffic calming devices. At your place today, you've got some rubber traffic calming solutions. That's from Director Bailey. There was one included in our memo. So our thought behind that was, first of all, the recommendation could be anywhere. You see the recommendation for Fairbanks because we thought that, okay, the traffic coming over the bridge, it's going to be repaved, it's going to be real smooth. Cars go there to try to beat the traffic. You know, we could move those devices to other locations. We want the board's feedback. That's not anything set in stone. What we did like is this rubberized one that the Director Bailey came with, because residents like that because it doesn't make noise in the middle of the night as much and wake you up. It still calms this traffic, but it's a rubberized, slope, it's designed that you can see it. You do have to have a sign that says either speed hump ahead, and they're portable. These ones that Director Bailey has, you can bolt in, and you can try it there for 4 or 5 months, and we can move it to another section of the town. Or if we wanted to do more, we get prices on more than one. But I think our main goal was to see if the board even likes this type of device in a roadway in Riverside to begin with.
How much is
I think
it?
we could select the places. We could come back with more data, but we weren't sure whether you were supportive of these type of devices.
What? I'm sorry.
How much is it?
I did not price it. I just found some examples of different types of devices. There's speed humps, speed bumps. I was particularly interested in this photograph of the speed table. And I think a speed hump or speed table is typically used for traffic calming. The speed bump is more of a parking lot issue and solid parking lots. But I did price it. I just wanted to share that as a potential device that, like the chief said, whether or not there's any interest at all in it.
My memory, though, was that Mr. Worthman, who did the study, was not really a proponent of this technology. Am I remembering incorrectly?
He was not a proponent of the speed for our village, for the speed bump or the hump. That's correct. He said that when he was here. For, I guess, the way that the streets are designed in Riverside. This is about the lowest grade we could find, meaning the lowest slope.
And that's the speed table you're talking about.
Yeah, and so Yeah, I don't think we discussed this when we did this type of table. Well, you're right, he was not a proponent of the speed bumps or the speed bumps.
And again, I think if I remember, because we had a pretty good conversation about it, a lot of that had to do with the public works side in the northern climates, because in the wintertime, the snow plows hit them and tear them up, and it's a heavy maintenance thing.
Well,
and there's, I mean, the tables over there, Steak and Egg, what's it?
Cook.
Cook, yeah, thanks. Those are built in, and they've been there half a dozen years at least, and they're still in pretty decent shape. But I kind of, if we're going to do these, I like these because then you can move them around if we have somebody that doesn't care for them and it's too much noise for them, or they have a child or something that has sleeping problems and there is some squeaky noise and stuff like that. We can relocate that investment that we make in it, and we can move it around. And when it comes fall time, you can pop them all up, store them, and then figure out where to deploy them next year, and we don't have to tear them up with the snow plows.
See, my memory was that Worthman, one of the things that Worthman didn't like about them was if they were used in conjunction over long stretches, because then people just jackrabbit between them.
Yeah. No,
so when I saw this, the first place I thought of was Lionel, because there you have that short run for when people turn to the stop sign. So one of these could basically have the effect of breaking that speed that people run from when they make the turn to the stop sign. So you wouldn't have that jackrabbit effect. It certainly makes sense to me that if you're going to do something like this on Berry Point, you got to do it on Fairbank. Because if you do it on Berry Point, you don't do it on Fairbank, they're just going to use Fairbank to get around them. But
well, but Berry Point will be having the speed calming stuff as well, where they'll have, right, correct me if I'm wrong, we're doing the parking box there.
I'm not so sure.
Up the lane.
I'm not so sure that speed humps or tables or anything like that would be permitted on an FAU route, which is Berry Point.
Yeah.
Which, that's a question that we would have to address. But
I would be interested in seeing one tried on Lionel.
Yeah, I think we'd be foolish not to
spot.
See, I think these are the answers for the smaller routes, the Lionels, the Akensides, the Fairbanks, things like that, where you can test them on, these routes that are used as cut-throughs, so we can calm that speed down. And then you also have, you got the park. So I think they're worthwhile. It depends on how much they are. I mean, that's the other question.
I would say try one on Lionel. Try this, because that is a persistent problem, and it seems like it's almost tailor-made for an experiment with this.
And you do like the speed table then, as opposed to the speed hump.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is going to turn once the speed. I think the speed bumps are time in the past.
Yeah,
right.
They're dangerous.
The big asphalt bumps, bicycles bump into them.
Or fire vehicles have difficulty with.
Yeah.
So one of the things we also talked about with these portable ones was if they do work out in an area, and it is something that we want to put more permanent, such as what McCook has on Riverside Avenue by the Park District. When they redo the street, it gets incorporated into that project. But that's after the portable one's out there for a while, and everything says, yes, this is what is needed in this location. So it's one of those, let's try it out, see how it works, and adjust it from there.
So portable, it just basically clips together, almost like those things we use at 4th of July that runs the hoses, the
solid rubber.
Yeah, the wires underneath them, but obviously in a bigger.
Which these might work pretty good in our town with some of the streets that have the crowns in them, where it'll sort of mold itself to the street a little bit better than doing something out of asphalt or concrete, which probably wouldn't work too well. So this might be a better option for them.
We can certainly get prices on what they cost. I know it's a little bit less when I know the documents I read, if your public works department can install them, because the company will come and professionally install it, or you could just have, if they have the expertise to do it, then it reduces the cost. So,
our public works department can do anything.
So,
sometimes you get the initial instruction, and then it's all on us.
Well, I look at these speed tables very similar to the speed signs that you move around. It could be almost the same type of program, just not as movable. But I think that's the same.
Your advanced warning signs could be portable too, then, because you have to have those to make those portable.
Right, we'll get prices on those. And the last item is the Park Place in Woodside, which is a little problematic. The only reason I say that is because these accidents that have been happening, I hesitate to call them meadow comb crashes, they're impaired drivers. So we've had 7 crashes at Park Place in Woodside. 6 of them have been drunk drivers. 1 has been a hit and run, which was likely a drunk driver just left before we got there. We just had one last weekend. It went over the curb, but he didn't smash anything until he got up to Forest Avenue and went into Brookfield. So Director Bailey had, when we were talking about this whole thing, he said, we're having some work done on Woodside in 2018. When we went out there, one of the things that's clear at night is that particular intersection is dark. And it's school crossing there too, for nighttime events. The traffic lights, I think they worked on those for the timing already when they put in the new crosswalks and stuff. So, but I'll let Director Bailey talk. He went and got estimates from one of our contractors with actually 2 proposals on how to make that intersection maybe safer.
Well, Chief Weitzel.
It's in there somewhere if you need right.
Chief Weitzel mentioned that intersection being subject of a number of accidents. We all know it's a complicated intersection. And we did meet out there on site, and we also consulted with Michael Worthman. And there's a number of things that we've implemented. We replaced some signs, newer signs, brighter signs, so people would more readily see them. These embedded traffic delineators that I mentioned that we plan to install, that's part of this analysis also. And then the other thing was that the intersection was not well lit for as complicated as it is. There's a one traffic light or street light on the north would be the south island, just as you get to the end of Woodside, the south end of the island. This proposal would add an additional street light at the intersection of Kimbark, and where Kimbark and Woodside come together. And we could put just a street light up. New street light would add more light to the intersection. And then an alternative would be to add new traffic signals and actually mount them to that new street light, which would eliminate these other freestanding traffic signals, which seems to me to be, we're doing one. If we decided we want to add more light there, add a street light there, we might as well add the traffic signals to it to clean up the intersection a bit. So I did get a proposal from Lines Pinner at $16,000 for the new street light, plus adding the traffic signals to it. Not necessarily budgeted expense this year, but going back to this motivation here, the stimulus for looking at that intersection was those accidents and what could we do. And like I say, there's some lower expensive things that we've already done, like the signs. We plan to install the embedded delineators, relatively inexpensive. This is a recommendation, much more expensive, but would potentially add to the safety of that intersection just because it would increase the lighting.
I think part of the problem is Woodside is considered, at that spot, people use it as a 2-lane road, and then they go on to Kimbark there, and it's a 1-lane road. So they run out of lane, and then they end up in the guy's planter. So that's a...
I have a question on that. Why, I mean, it's been this way forever, but why is it a little jog onto Woodside in front of the school? I mean, to me, it's always seemed, why not just keep going down Kimbark the way that Doug was mentioning? I mean, it seems easier, seems smarter.
I don't know if there's an opportunity to redesign that intersection, but I don't have any historical knowledge.
Why do you jog there? Is that a requirement?
I don't think there's any reason for that. I'm not sure about the jog, but most of the accidents that have occurred there that we've responded to, they drive directly over that little island that's in the middle of the street, where cars can go on one side to turn onto Park Place or go straight. They drive over the sign that's there and then into the yard of that residence, into their...
They're hammered. I mean, so...
Right.
And drive there with your device on it, and it doesn't show the jog. So if you're in a dark car with a dark street, you're looking at this thing glaring at you in the eyes, and you're just kind of following that unlit. That's
Six of the 7 accidents were drunk driving.
I know, but again, I think it's an interesting thing. The change, the reason I think we're seeing an increase in this because we all
People
use these things.
are texting and not using Waze when they're drunk drinking and driving.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm not advocating a street light. All I'm saying is, in response to these accidents, we looked at that intersection just to try to determine if there's some things we could do to improve it. And like I said, there's some low-cost things, and then there's obviously this higher-cost thing. But other than changing geometry, and I don't know what that would all be involved in.
Somebody, I can't remember which one of you said this, somebody had mentioned the possibility of those rumble, are they called rumble strips?
Yeah.
And because your thought was basically you wake these people up, right?
It's kind of like what they have on the side of the highways where if you start crossing towards the shoulder, you hear the rumble and get back on the roadway type of thing.
Now, do those create some kind of public works or maintenance issue?
If they're actually ground into the pavement, I think they're quite durable. They will deteriorate over time. I'm not sure the life of them, because usually I have a 15-year planning life for an asphalt surface. I'm not sure right offhand how long they would last. I'm not sure if because they start to lose their sharpness and they kind of get rounded off and stuff like that. So I'm not sure about the longevity of them. That's something we could check into.
That seemed like a very creative solution to me, because that's.
I hate to say this, there might be the possibility of portable rumble strips in it. It's probably a lot less expensive to actually groove them with the grinding equipment, but we can look further into that, I think.
Because it seems to me, I wonder how much lights are going to help somebody that is in their condition.
I mean, the motivation is these accidents, but like the Chief said, there's a reason perhaps beyond the geometry.
I mean, I think having the street light especially, and adding more light to that area at night I think that's a good idea in itself, regardless of the accidents, but maybe some conjunction.
We might budget for that for next year, perhaps, or I don't know if we want to try it this year or something, but.
Yeah, I think we do need lighting and look at other supporting mechanisms as well. But lighting, I think, is a given.
Are we convinced enough about what's your preferred way of handling this if we want to do?
If you want to do it this year, we can look at because this could be conceivably paid out of non-home rule sales tax or MFT funds, so we could look to see what our funding levels are given the projects that we have slated for this year, and then incorporate it as part of that. It would be a budget amendment then thereafter, but we would note it on the agenda history sheet if the board wants to move forward with this one.
I think I see a pretty strong consensus on this one.
I'm not clear on the two options. I guess I wasn't following the bid language on the two options.
The lower cost option is simply just installing a street light there.
Yeah.
The more expensive option is to put the traffic signals on the street light post. So you're cleaning up the intersection to a degree by getting it, and putting modern contemporary traffic signals in also, but they're installed on the street light post.
So we'd be moving the existing street light.
Well, you would, yes, you would actually be repositioning it. It might be more effective, actually. You could maybe move it over here for cell phone drivers or something like that. But that's the difference in the prices, is whether to incorporate the traffic signals, which I think is, if we're doing it, we might as well.
So from what I hear, we agree with the recommendations of pretty much across the board. We want you to look more at the low left turn solution for Woodside, and then we'll move forward with the street light and the traffic signal. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. And I'm delighted about this new traffic enforcement car. I think that's great. And that was really generous of the township to.
It was, and as soon as we have it outfitted, I'll bring it out, and maybe we'll use it right over at Delaplane and Aiken.
There you go.
So it's got more lights on it than a Christmas tree, so I don't think you can see it.
People at home probably can't see it, but that's...
Before we move on, I just want to say thank you to you guys, because I know you got plenty on your plate without having this one on there as well. And I appreciate all the effort that's gone into that, and the good thoughtfulness of thinking through, again, downstream, what it's going to do to the next neighbor and the next neighbor, because as we reroute that around. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and as a team effort, and it's really, Ed has his expertise, Matt has his, and we went out and did what we all took our part and came back, and
Then you had techno decals.
that's right. And the village manager didn't check in on us till the end. Or maybe once or twice.
All right, thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on now, we'll go to ordinances and resolutions. Up is an ordinance amending Section 862, Water Service Accounts and Charges, and 879, Sewerage Service Charges of the Village Code of the Village of Riverside, Illinois, relative to a water and sewerage system infrastructure maintenance fee. Director Johns.
Good evening, President Sells, Board of Trustees, Manager Francis. Before you tonight is an ordinance recommending a $30 bi-monthly water and sewer infrastructure fee to be added to utility bills. This would yield approximately $540,000 in revenue annually. The Water and Sewer Fund operates as an enterprise fund, relying 100% on user fees and no property tax revenue. These user fees have to cover the cost of operations, including the cost of water, personnel, and debt service. Any remaining funds are used for water and sewer capital improvements. Over the past 10 years, operating expenses have increased by 52%, while the offsetting revenues have only increased 36%. The major factor in this increase of operating expenses is the increase of the cost of water, which has doubled. Any operational surplus is used to fund capital improvements, which have included the $3.3 million First Division sewer separation project in 2017. Looking to the future, the projects outlined in the village's 5-year capital improvement plan will decrease the fund balance in the water and sewer fund to below the target levels by 2021. The recommendation of the infrastructure fee would stabilize these funds.
So I'd ask for a motion to adopt an ordinance amending Sections 862 and 879 of the Village of Riverside, Illinois Code relative to water and sewage system infrastructure maintenance fee. By Mr. Gisa.
Second.
By Mr. Pollock. Any questions or discussions? No? Please call the roll.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Gisa.
Aye.
Trustee Lumsden.
Aye.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Sedeby.
Aye.
Trustee Peters.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Director. We have no new business this evening. We have no.
Can I interrupt on the new business front?
Yes, please.
After the last meeting, something I forgot to bring up in regard to the camera discussion was red light cameras. And I know I did send an email out to the board. I just didn't know where that stood, or if we have a consensus to ask Chief Weitzel to include that too.
I'm glad. I meant to bring that up. I heard from several trustees that there was an interest in revisiting this. I mean, it was looked at in 2015 and 16, but I think that there is interest in at least revisiting it and getting some more data. Is that correct? I'd already asked Chief to start looking at that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, but so that's the consensus of the board
Appreciate it.
to move forward. Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mike, for bringing that up. No need for an executive session. I ask for a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
By Mr. Lumsden.
Second.
By Mr. Ballerine. Please call the roll.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Gisa.
Aye.
Trustee Lumsden.
Aye.
Trustee Valerie.
Aye.
Trustee Sedeby.
Aye.
Trustee Peters.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you and good night.